It was 7 in the morning when the message came through. The sky over Portland was pale and silent after a long night of rain. I was pouring my first cup of coffee when my phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't think much of it. Mom usually texted early, reminding me to pick up groceries or check on Dad's insurance bill. But this time, there were only 7 words. You're banned from Thanksgiving until you bow to your sister. No hello, no explanation, just a decree. For a second, I thought it had to be a joke. Then another message appeared. Megan deserves respect. Until you apologize, don't bother showing up. The steam from my coffee curled into the air and vanished. My hand didn't shake, but my stomach dropped like I'd missed a step in the dark. I stared at the screen while the clock ticked in slow rhythm on the wall. I didn't reply. I didn't argue. I just opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, and started scrolling through every bill with their names on it. They wanted a bow. What they would get instead was silence. I sat there for a long moment, trying to process what had just happened. Outside, the city was waking up, cars sloshing through puddles, a distant dog barking the low hum of traffic. Inside, my apartment felt too quiet. I'd been excluded before, subtly in conversations, decisions, even in family photos that I took, but was never part of. But this was different. This was official. It was punishment written in text, delivered like a business order. Mom, Ellen Avery, was never cruel outright. She just had a way of turning rules into love and guilt into loyalty. Family first was her mantra, and somehow that always meant doing things her way. Dad Richard was kind but timid, the kind of man who'd avoid conflict even if the house was on fire. And Megan, well, Megan was the golden child, the family's little son. She had a talent for playing fragile, for turning mistakes into sympathy. Growing up, I learned early that my role was the opposite of hers. Megan cried. I comforted. Megan spent. I covered. Megan fell apart. I cleaned up. You're the strong one, Mom would say, and I took that as love. It wasn't. It was delegation. Strength became my excuse to be used. 2 weeks before the text, we'd all been at Megan's birthday dinner at some new Italian place downtown. She'd arrived late, all shine and perfume, wearing a sequined dress I'd quietly helped pay for last spring when her boutique profits were low. The night had been a blur of compliments directed at her stories about her business, her latest brand collaboration. I'd smiled, lifted my glass, said all the right things, until dessert came and Mom decided to announce that I still hadn't apologized for embarrassing Megan last month. Embarrassing her. That was how she described the night I told Megan I couldn't loan her another $1,000 for her rent. She'd stormed out of the restaurant, cried to Mom, and somehow I'd become the villain. At her birthday, she made a show of forgiveness. It's fine, she said loudly, patting my hand. Lauren just gets stressed when she can't control things. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, because it was easier than explaining the truth that I'd been the one holding the family together while they all looked the other way. That was 2 weeks ago. And now here I was banned from Thanksgiving. I looked around my apartment, the tidy kitchen, the single coffee mug, the unopened mail stacked neatly on the counter. I'd built this life for peace, not punishment. I'd done everything right, paid my bills, worked hard, helped my family whenever they called. And somehow I was still the one cast out. The rain started again, soft, at first tapping against the window like fingers drumming. I scrolled through my messages, rereading Mom's words. You're banned until you bow. The phrasing stuck with me. Bow. It wasn't about an apology. It was about submission. It was about Megan winning. A new message popped up from Mom. It's for the best, sweetheart. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I could almost hear her voice, soft, rehearsed, the same tone she used when she wanted me to feel small. I set my phone down, letting the screen dim. For most of my adult life, I'd been their quiet provider. When Dad lost hours at work, I stepped in to pay the property taxes. When Mom's car broke down, I handled the repair bill. When Megan maxed out her credit card, I transferred money before interest could hit. They all called me so responsible, as if it were a quirk, a harmless habit. But responsibility was just another word for control, and they liked that I carried it so they didn't have to. I thought about all the times I'd answered their calls in the middle of meetings, all the just this once favors that turned into routines. Every month money flowed quietly from my account into theirs. I told myself it was love. It was duty. It was what good daughters did. Now, staring at the blinking cursor on my laptop screen, I saw the truth. It wasn't love. It was transaction disguised as family. And I was done paying the fee. I opened my budgeting spreadsheet, rows and rows of neat blue lines. Each category told a story. Utilities, $186 parents' home. Car insurance, $240 Megan. Cell plan, $217 family account. My cursor hovered over the totals. The number at the bottom made my throat tighten. More than $20,000 over the past 2 years. I'd paid for stability that wasn't even mine. The coffee had gone cold. I stood up, walked to the window, and watched rain gather in silver beads along the glass. The city looked clean-washed. I thought of Thanksgiving Mom's table, crowded with plates and chatter. Megan in her perfect dress, Dad carving turkey, while pretending not to notice who was missing. Would they even feel my absence, or just my unpaid bills? The question lingered like fog. I turned away from the window and sat back down at my desk. If silence had been my weakness, it was about to become my weapon. I opened a new document and began typing. The title came to me instantly: Family Expenses, Personal Record. Under it, I started listing every bill, every date, every amount I'd covered. It wasn't anger that guided me, not yet. It was clarity, the cold, clean kind that comes after a long storm. Halfway through the list, my phone buzzed again. A message from Megan. "You could have avoided all this if you'd just said sorry." I didn't reply. I highlighted another line on my spreadsheet instead. August 14, boutique rent transfer, $900. My jaw tightened. They wanted a bow. They'd get something else. I saved the file, closed the laptop, and exhaled. The apartment felt different, lighter almost. I walked to the counter, dumped the cold coffee down the sink, and poured another cup. Outside, the rain was easing, the clouds thinning to pale gray. For the first time in a long while, the sound of it didn't feel like sadness. It felt like cleansing. I leaned on the counter, cup warm between my hands, and whispered to myself, not in anger, but in quiet resolve. Let's see what happens when the quiet one finally says no. That night, sleep never came. The rain kept whispering against the glass, and by the time the first light touched the window, I already knew I couldn't keep pretending this was normal anymore. The next morning, the world looked the same, but nothing in me did. I poured my coffee the same way I always did, watching the dark stream fall into the cup, hearing that soft, steady sound. But something about the silence had changed. It didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow, like an empty house after everyone's moved out. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rain tapping against the window. It was a sound I'd lived with my whole life, quiet, constant, unacknowledged. For years, silence had been my ritual. It meant control, composure, patience. It meant I didn't complain when things were unfair, didn't speak up when I was overlooked. It was my armor. But now it just felt like evidence, proof that I'd been trained to disappear. I sat at my desk, staring at my laptop where last night's spreadsheet still glowed faintly. Lines of numbers, rows of months, tiny blue fonts that spelled out a lifetime of quiet sacrifice. I scrolled up and down, feeling the strange, heavy ache of seeing my own devotion measured in digits. It hadn't started with money. It started years ago with something smaller. I was 23 when Dad called one evening, his voice tight. "The property tax came in higher than expected," he said. "We're a little short this month." I didn't even hesitate. "I can cover it, Dad." I transferred $2,000 that night, told him not to worry about it. "Just this once," he said, grateful, embarrassed. Just this once became just until next month. Next month became every month. They didn't mean to make it permanent. But every time I helped, I made it easier for them not to fix anything. And every time I stayed silent, I confirmed that I didn't mind. When Mom's car broke down, I paid the mechanic. When Dad's surgery wasn't fully covered by insurance, I sent the hospital the difference. Megan's rent was late, I wired the money. And every time Mom said the same thing, "You're such a good daughter, Lauren. So responsible." It wasn't praise. It was a contract. By 26, I was the unofficial accountant of the Avery family. Every bill, every reminder, every forgotten due date passed through me. I knew their passwords, their PINs, their credit limits better than they did. I could predict when Megan's overdraft fee would hit before she even noticed. Megan was always the charming one, the golden child. She never had to try hard because people wanted to give her things. She knew how to tilt her head, soften her voice, cry just enough to make everyone else feel guilty. I used to envy that power. Now I saw it for what it was: manipulation dressed up as helplessness. When we were kids, she could break something and Mom would turn to me. "You're older, Lauren. Be the example. Let it go." When she flunked her first college course, Mom told me not to mention it to Dad. "Megan's just going through a rough time," she said. "You're good with money. Maybe you can help her figure things out." So I did. I transferred money from my savings into her account to cover her tuition penalty. She thanked me with a text full of hearts and promises to pay me back that never came true. At 31, she started her dream business, an online boutique selling imported clothes. Mom threw her a launch party at their house. I designed her website, paid the hosting fee, even helped her order inventory on my credit card because she didn't qualify for a business account. At the party, Megan toasted herself. "To hard work, faith, and family support," she said, holding her glass high. I clapped like everyone else, even though the only thing she'd invested was her charm. Later that night, when everyone left, Mom hugged her and said, "You're going to do great things, sweetheart. Lauren's just not the creative type, but she's dependable. Every family needs one. Dependable." That word sank in deep. It sounded like a compliment, but it wasn't. It meant predictable, replaceable, uninteresting. I learned that my reliability was convenient, not admired. They didn't respect my sacrifices because they couldn't see them. To them, I wasn't generous. I was just doing what I was supposed to. I remembered one summer afternoon 2 years ago. Megan had asked me to help her choose a new car. She said she'd pay the down payment herself. I went with her to the dealership. She picked a shiny silver SUV way out of her range. I warned her gently. "You'll struggle with the monthly payments," I said. She pouted. "You don't believe in me, do you?" By the end of the week, I'd co-signed her lease. 6 months later, the payments fell behind. I covered them not because I wanted to, but because I didn't want her credit to tank. I told myself it was the responsible thing. That's what responsible people do. They fix, they save, they absorb. But no one ever asked what I needed fixing. The memory of that conversation still stung. How Mom praised Megan for taking initiative while I sat there, exhausted and visible. At family dinners, when I tried to talk about work, they would cut me off. "That's nice, honey," Mom would say, but Megan's boutique just got a new investor. Even Dad, quiet and weary, never spoke up. He'd just nod and say, "You know your sister's different. She's got a good heart." Good heart. What did that even mean? To them, it meant forgiveness without accountability. It meant she could take and never be called selfish. Last Thanksgiving before the ban, I'd arrived early to help cook. I brought groceries, paid for the turkey, peeled potatoes for 3 hours, while Mom and Megan planned the seating chart. When the guests arrived, Megan took credit for the menu. "It's my recipe," she chirped, standing over the oven. Mom smiled proudly. I said nothing. Later, as I stood at the sink washing dishes, I watched through the doorway as Megan laughed with our relative's wine glass in hand, basking in attention. Dad clapped her shoulder and said, "That's my girl." No one noticed I hadn't eaten. I told myself it didn't matter. That helping them was its own reward. But standing there, my hands in soapy water, I felt the quiet ache of being necessary but not loved. I thought of that moment now, sitting alone at my desk, the memory pressing like a bruise that never healed. For years I'd believed silence was loyalty. That if I stayed steady, stayed giving, they'd see me as good. But all it did was teach them how easy I was to overlook. Maybe this was why the text didn't break me, it just confirmed what I'd known all along. I wasn't family, I was a service. I opened my notebook and began to write not numbers this time, but words. Mom's car repairs, $840. Dad's tax payments, $2,000. Megan's rent, $900. But next to each line I wrote how it made me feel. Unnoticed, expected, used. By the third page, I realized I wasn't writing a list. I was writing a confession. I remembered something Rachel, my old coworker, once said to me. You act like your family's accountant, not their daughter. Back then I'd laughed. Now, it felt like prophecy. I closed the notebook and leaned back in my chair. The apartment was quiet again, but it no longer felt like punishment. It felt like a chance to finally hear myself think. I walked to the window. The rain had stopped, leaving a thin layer of silver mist over the street. I watched it drift and fade like smoke after a fire. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for the silence. I felt grateful for it. I whispered, half to the empty room, half to myself. For years I thought loyalty meant silence, but silence only taught them how easy I was to ignore. On the table, my notebook lay open, pages filled with evidence of every sacrifice, every quiet moment that went unseen. I picked up my pen, drew a line under the last entry, and wrote one more sentence. If silence was my language, then receipts would be my revenge. The words sat there, sharp and final. I closed the notebook, the sound echoing softly in the still air. Outside, the mist cleared, revealing a slice of pale blue sky, fragile but free. That clarity stayed with me through the night, and by the next evening, just as I began to feel a fragile kind of calm, my phone buzzed again with her name lighting up the screen. The voicemail came just as I was locking my front door that evening. Megan's voice poured through the speaker, sweet as honey and twice as fake. You know Mom wouldn't have banned you if you'd just said sorry, she said. You always make things so dramatic, Lauren. It's just Thanksgiving. I stood in the hallway for a long time, the sound of her voice echoing off the walls. Just Thanksgiving. That was the thing about her. She could turn any humiliation into something trivial, any cruelty into a misunderstanding. I deleted the message without finishing it, but her words lingered like perfume I couldn't wash off. I'd been told my whole life that Megan was special. Even when we were kids, she was the one everyone noticed. The one who got the new clothes, the better bedroom, the last slice of pie. Mom called her our sunshine while I was our rock. The way Mom said it, you'd think the sun was a blessing and the rock a burden. When Megan broke something, I got blamed. You're older, Lauren, Mom would say. You should have been watching her. When she failed a test, it was because she was creative, not lazy. When I got straight A's, it was because I was responsible. That word followed me like a shadow. Once, when we were teenagers, Megan threw a tantrum because I borrowed her hairbrush without asking. She screamed so loudly that Dad came running, thinking someone had been hurt. I tried to explain, but Mom cut me off. Just apologize, Lauren. Keep the peace. So I did. I always did. The pattern never changed. Megan made the mess. I cleaned it. She cried. I comforted. She spent. I paid. Mom said I was so mature, which sounded less like admiration and more like a reminder to keep absorbing the blows. Years later, when Megan got her first apartment, she called me the day before rent was due. I'm short just a little, she said, voice trembling. It's embarrassing to even ask. I sent $900 before the conversation ended. A week later, I saw her Instagram post a champagne glass, a new designer bag, the caption, "Investing in myself." That was Megan's gift. She could turn manipulation into poetry. Mom always defended her. You know your sister, she'd say. She's sensitive. You're the strong one. Can't you just let it go? And I did. Because every time I tried to stand up for myself, it became a crime against family unity. 2 weeks before the text that banned me, I sat through her birthday dinner. It was a full production, Megan, in a glitter dress, her boutique friends taking selfies, mom fluttering around like a stage manager. The restaurant lights were warm, but everything felt cold. Halfway through dessert, Megan decided to tell a story. "Remember when Lauren freaked out about the money for my car?" she said, laughing. "She was acting like I was buying a yacht or something." Everyone laughed, even Dad. I smiled too, though my throat burned. "That's not exactly what happened," I said quietly. Megan tilted her head, smiling like a cat. "You're so sensitive, Lauren. Relax, it's a joke." The table went silent, awkward for a beat too long. Then Mom clapped her hands and said, "Who wants coffee?" That was how it always went. Megan insulted, I absorbed. The peace restored itself on my back. Later that night, Dad walked me to my car. He looked tired like he always did after one of Megan's performances. "You know how your mom and sister are," he said. "Sometimes it's easier just to say sorry and move on." I looked at him wondering if he even realized what he was asking. "Even when I didn't do anything wrong," he sighed. "Sometimes being right isn't worth the trouble." That was the moment I understood exactly how our family worked. Peace wasn't peace. It was submission. Now, standing in my apartment with that deleted voicemail echoing in my head, I could feel the old anger stirring the one I'd buried under politeness and patience for years. I sat down on the couch, grabbed my notebook, and flipped to the first page. Mom's car repairs, $840. Dad's surgery copay, $2,300. Megan's boutique rent, $900. Every number had a face attached to it. Every payment was a wound that never got acknowledged. I ran my finger down the list and stopped at one entry. Megan's credit card bill, $250 urgent. I remembered the call. She'd been crying. "They're threatening to send it to collections. Please, Lauren, I'll die if my credit's ruined." I'd paid it before she finished her sentence. 3 days later, she posted pictures from a concert with the caption, "Manifesting Abundance." My chest tightened, not with anger anymore, but with disbelief that I'd been this blind for so long. I flipped to a new page and wrote patterns of behavior. Underneath it, I listed every phrase they'd ever used to keep me small. "You're just overreacting. Don't make a big deal. Be the bigger person. It's just family." The ink bled slightly through the paper, dark and final. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Megan. "Mom says you owe me an apology for the boutique thing. You embarrassed me in front of her. You think money makes you better, it just makes you cold." I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then screenshot the message and printed it. I slipped it into the back of my notebook, labeling the page "Emotional Expenses." Somewhere between all the noise, I remembered Janet Morales, my first real manager years ago, the woman who'd taught me how to negotiate my worth at work. She'd once told me, "You have to separate generosity from love, Lauren. Love doesn't invoice you." Back then I'd laughed. I thought she was being cynical. Now I finally understood. Generosity had been my love language because it was the only one my family accepted. They didn't want my time, my thoughts, or my boundaries. They wanted my balance transfers. I closed my notebook and leaned back, exhaustion settling over me like a heavy blanket. The rain had started again, faint but steady, filling the room with the kind of white noise that felt like breathing. For years, I'd thought being the strong one meant staying quiet. It meant not fighting back when I was disrespected, not arguing when I was blamed. But strength without voice isn't strength, it's servitude. I poured myself another glass of water, walked to the window, and looked out at the city lights reflecting on the wet pavement. Somewhere out there, Megan was probably having dinner with friends, laughing about how dramatic I was. Maybe Mom was telling herself she'd done the right thing, keeping peace by pushing me out. But something had shifted in me. I wasn't angry, not in the way I used to be. I was clear. And clarity was more dangerous than rage. My phone buzzed once more before I turned in for the night. It was a photo from Megan, her and Mom together, smiling in a kitchen full of Thanksgiving decorations. The caption read, "Getting ready for a peaceful holiday. Family first." I didn't reply. I didn't even feel pain this time. I just watched the screen until it went black, reflecting my own face back at me. Then, without thinking, I grabbed a pen and opened my notebook again. On a fresh page, I wrote in big, deliberate letters, "People who take." Things I gave. The pen scratched across the paper, firm, steady, certain. For years, I'd been the echo that answered every call for help. Now I was done being their echo. I closed the notebook, turned off the lights, and let the room fill with darkness. The rain outside had slowed to a whisper, like it was listening too. That fragile calm didn't last long. The next morning, my phone lit up with a new flood of notifications, and this time it wasn't just Megan. It started with a simple ding, then another, then a third. By the time I looked down at my phone, the screen was lit up with a flood of messages. At the top of the group chat, I saw the title Avery Thanksgiving 2024. I wasn't surprised that they'd started a thread. They always did around this time of year, sharing recipes, assigning dishes, arguing over who'd host. But as I scrolled through, my heart began to sink. The list appeared in neat little bullet points: Mom, Dad, Aunt Karen, Uncle Pete, Cousin Jenny, Megan, even her boyfriend Tyler. My name wasn't there. Underneath the list, Megan had written, "Keeping it small this year. Mom's orders." A smiley face followed. I stared at it, rereading the message, hoping I'd missed something. Maybe my name was lower down, maybe an oversight. But no, the thread moved on like I didn't exist. Someone dropped a turkey gif. Another posted a string of emojis, clinking glasses, laughing faces, hearts. I kept scrolling, my chest tightening. After a few minutes, I typed a short message, trying to sound casual. "Hey, looks like fun. Did I miss something about the guest list?" For a moment, no one responded. Then Mom's message appeared. "We're just keeping things simple this year, sweetheart. Space is tight." Space was tight. The same excuse they'd used when I was 12 and Megan wanted her own room. I'd slept in the converted storage nook for 2 years while she got the window and the new furniture. Some things never changed. Then Megan replied, "Limited seating, Lauren. Try Christmas if you behave." My stomach turned. The words blurred. I could almost hear her voice in my head, playful, mocking, that sing-song tone she used when she wanted everyone to think she was joking but wasn't. The chat went silent for a second. Then someone sent another turkey gif, and the conversation rolled on as if nothing had happened. I sat there, my fingers frozen above the screen. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Mostly I was tired. Tired of pretending that humiliation didn't sting just because I'd learned to hide it. I thought of replying, of saying something sharp, something to defend myself. But I could already imagine Mom's response. "Lauren, don't start drama." That was her favorite phrase, "Don't start drama, don't make waves, don't ruin the mood." So instead, I closed the chat. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I worked from home, answered emails, took a walk in the drizzle. But every time I checked my phone, there was a new message in that thread: photos of the turkey, questions about side dishes, jokes about who'd burn the rolls this year. I didn't open it again. I didn't need to. The message was clear. By evening, my phone buzzed once more. This time it was a text from Megan directly. "Don't take it personally, okay, Mom, just wants peace. You know how you get, how I get." That phrase landed like a slap. To her, I wasn't a person. I was a problem to be managed, a flaw in an otherwise perfect picture. I set my phone face down and walked to the kitchen. The rain had picked up again, tapping hard against the glass. I stood there in the dim light, hands gripping the counter, breathing through the ache in my chest. For years I'd told myself I didn't need their approval, that I was independent above their childish drama, but it still hurt. Because no matter how old you get, being erased by your own family cuts the same. Around 9, another notification flashed across the screen, a Facebook tag from Megan. I hesitated before opening it. The post was public. A picture of her and Mom in the kitchen arms around each other, smiling over a half-prepared turkey. The caption read "Family First, keeping it cozy this year." The comment section filled fast. "So sweet. You two look just alike. Can't wait to see everyone." I stared at the screen, feeling the sharp, familiar sting crawl up my throat. There it was again, the same phrase that had haunted me my whole life. Family first. Family first had always meant Megan first. I closed the app. The quiet in my apartment pressed in on me. I thought about calling Dad just to hear a voice that wasn't pretending, but I knew how that would go. He'd stumble through an apology that wasn't his to try to soothe me, tell me it wasn't a big deal. He'd say he was stuck in the middle, that Mom and Megan just wanted peace. Peace. That word had become their shield, their way of disguising exclusion as virtue. I sat back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. Peace was what they called it when I paid their bills. Peace was what they called it when I bit my tongue while Megan mocked me. Peace was what they called it when they banished me for standing up for myself. My phone buzzed again. Another group chat message. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Aunt Karen had posted a picture of the dining room table, set beautifully candles in silver holders, place cards written in Mom's neat handwriting. One by one, I read the names. Mom, Dad, Megan, Tyler, Aunt Karen, Uncle Pete, Cousin Jenny. 8 cards, 8 names, no 9th. No Lauren. Megan commented, "Perfect number this year. No extra chairs, no drama." A string of laughing emojis followed. The air left my lungs. I didn't cry. I just felt this deep, hollow quiet fill me like a vacuum, pulling everything inside me still. I typed out a reply, "Enjoy dinner." Then I deleted it before sending. Instead, I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed something else. If they can erase me that easily, maybe it's time to erase what I've built for them. I locked my phone and sat in silence. A while later, Rachel texted me. Saw Megan's post. "You okay?" My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I almost typed the usual "I'm fine," but something stopped me. Instead, I wrote, "Not yet. But I will be." Her reply came fast. "Good. Because one day they'll realize what they lost, and you'll already be gone." I didn't know if she meant gone emotionally or gone completely, maybe both. The rain eased into a drizzle again. I looked out the window, the city lights smearing into long streaks of gold on the wet pavement. Somewhere across town, my family was probably laughing, debating gravy, or stuffing, pretending everything was perfect. For years, I'd been the invisible thread holding them together. The one who quietly fixed, covered, filled in. And now they'd cut me loose, without realizing that I'd been the one holding the fabric up. They thought they'd punished me, but in truth they'd just freed me. I turned off my phone, finished the last of my cold coffee, and pulled the curtains closed. The room went dark, except for the faint glow of the city outside. I whispered to the empty room they just uninvited me from their table. Tomorrow, I'll uninvite them from my wallet. The words sounded strange at first. Harsh, final, but also honest. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like weakness. It felt like a beginning. That night, I fell asleep to the sound of rain against the windows, and when morning came, Thanksgiving morning, the silence in my apartment felt heavier than ever. Thanksgiving morning arrived quietly, without alarms, without a plan, without a single reason to get out of bed. The city outside was still half asleep, gray light pressing through thin clouds, the sound of drizzle steady against the windows. I made coffee, stood by the counter, and realized it was the first holiday in years when no one expected me to show up to bring food, to pay for something, to fix something. The silence was sharp, but it was honest. I tried to treat it like any other Thursday. I cleaned the apartment, folded laundry, answered a few work emails. When that didn't fill the emptiness, I went for a walk. The air was cold enough to sting my cheeks, the kind of air that carried the scent of fireplaces and roasting turkey from every other home. Families were inside, laughing, setting tables, clinking glasses. It was impossible not to feel the contrast their noise, my quiet. A neighbor across the hall, an older woman with silver hair, opened her door at the same time I came back up the stairs. She smiled kindly. "No family visiting today, dear," I forced a small smile. "Not this year." She nodded, a sympathetic look in her eyes, then disappeared behind her door. I stood there for a moment, listening to the muffled laughter that drifted from her apartment. Back inside, the silence swallowed me whole. The clock ticked too loudly. I scrolled through social media just to hear something familiar, but that only made it worse. Megan had already posted a video her and mom basting the turkey, the caption reading, "Family makes everything taste better." I put the phone face down. The apartment suddenly felt too small, too clean, too still. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. I almost didn't check it. When I finally did, it was a text from Mom. "We saved you a plate, sweetheart. It's on the porch. Happy Thanksgiving." Porch. A single word, but it hit harder than any insult. Not "come over." Not "we miss you." Just a plate. Left outside like a delivery. I stared at the message until the letters blurred. For years I'd told myself that what I did for them, paying bills, covering expenses, buying groceries, was love. I thought it was proof of belonging. But standing there with that text glowing in my hand, I realized how easily I'd been replaced, how little space I'd ever really occupied. By late afternoon, I'd cleaned the kitchen twice and still couldn't shake the heaviness. My stomach growled, but I didn't bother cooking. I wasn't hungry. I was restless. The thought came quietly like a whisper, "Just drive by." I told myself it wasn't about confrontation. I didn't plan to stop or knock. I just wanted to see to confirm that it was real. So I drove. The streets were slick with rain, the clouds low, and as I turned onto their street, I saw the familiar row of parked cars lining the curb. The house glowed warm from the inside, light spilling from every window. Through the glass, I could see silhouettes, people moving, laughing, raising glasses. I slowed the car, keeping my distance. My chest felt tight, but I couldn't look away. Then I saw it. On the porch near the front door was a single plate covered in foil sitting on a small wooden table, a fork tucked neatly beside it, as if presentation could disguise the cruelty. And just beside the plate, a neighbor's golden retriever sniffed curiously at the foil. Its tail wagged as it pawed lightly at the edge. Something inside me went perfectly still. For a moment, all I could do was watch that dog, its nose pressed to the plate, its curiosity innocent, its hunger simple. I thought about how many times I'd fed my family without ever being fed in return, how many times I'd been the invisible one, quietly holding things together so they could laugh like that inside. A lump rose in my throat, but no tears came, only clarity. I didn't stop the car, I didn't honk, I didn't get out. I just kept driving past the house, past the laughter, past everything I'd once mistaken for home. The rain began to fall harder, streaking across the windshield. My vision blurred for a moment, but it wasn't from the weather. That plate on the porch wasn't just food. It was a message. You're not one of us. You're outside now. And for the first time I realized that maybe being outside wasn't punishment. Maybe it was freedom. By the time I got home, the drizzle had turned into a downpour. I hung up my coat, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the floor leaning against the wall. The silence that greeted me wasn't cold anymore. It was mine. I opened my laptop. The spreadsheet I'd made days ago was still there waiting. Each line of data looked different now, less like evidence of generosity, more like a map of how I'd been drained. I stared at it for a long time. Then I began deleting every automatic payment one by one. Mortgage contribution cancel. Utilities cancel. Family phone plan cancel. Insurance cancel. Streaming services cancel. Each click sent a tiny pulse of adrenaline through me, not anger power. For years my actions had been invisible. Now, for the first time, they were deliberate. When I was done, I sat back and exhaled, the sound soft and shaky in the quiet apartment. My hands trembled slightly. I hadn't expected it to feel like this, not triumphant, not vengeful, just light. The rain outside slowed again, falling in steady rhythmic drops. I turned off the lights and let the room dim to gray. I pictured the house I'd left behind, the laughter, the empty chair at the table, the untouched plate cooling on the porch. And then I pictured something else, Mom, picking up her phone tomorrow, realizing the bills hadn't gone through. Megan trying to buy something online and seeing her card declined. The quiet panic that would ripple through them, the realization of how much they'd depended on the person they'd pushed out. It wasn't about revenge, it was about release. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat by the window, and watched the rain slide down the glass like silver threads. My reflection looked calm, older somehow. They left me a plate, I whispered. I left them the bill. The words sounded strange, almost bitter, but I couldn't help the small smile that tugged at my lips. It wasn't joy exactly, it was relief. Hours later, my phone lit up on the table. Missed calls. Mom, Megan, Dad. Then a stream of messages. Lauren, did you touch something? The internet's not working. The card got declined. Megan, what did you do? I didn't answer. I watched as the notifications stacked one after another, filling the screen like raindrops on glass. 37 calls by the time I turned the phone face down. I leaned back on the couch, eyes closed, the faint hum of the city outside, steady and low. Finally, they noticed me. But they were too late. The silence around me didn't feel like emptiness anymore. It felt like ownership of my space, my choices, my peace. I lifted my glass in a quiet toast to no one and whispered Happy Thanksgiving. And for the first time, I meant it. I woke up the next morning to a phone vibrating endlessly on the nightstand, missed calls stacking faster than I could count, proof that the silence I'd left behind was finally being heard. The phone wouldn't stop buzzing. By mid-morning, there were 52 missed calls stacked on my screen like little tombstones. Mom, Megan, even Dad. I watched them flash and fade. As I sat on the couch, the mug of cold coffee untouched beside me. My apartment was quiet except for the sound of rain tapping the glass. I didn't answer a single one. I'd spent a lifetime responding, fixing, rescuing. This silence felt like control. When the noise finally stopped, I opened my laptop. The banking app loaded slowly, and when it did, I stared at the endless scroll of transactions, my family's names lined up in a neat digital graveyard. Every payment was a memory: mortgage supplements, utility bills, co-pays, Venmo transfers for emergencies, grocery orders, subscription renewals. Every line was proof that I had built their comfort one quiet sacrifice at a time. I hit print. The machine hummed to life, spitting out page after page. The smell of ink filled the air. When the last page slid into the tray, I gathered them into a neat pile, the paper warm beneath my fingers. I spread them across the floor the way detectives spread evidence. Here was Mom's car repair, Dad's prescription refill, Megan's boutique rent. All of it written in black and white, undeniable. I picked up a highlighter and began to mark the numbers one by one. Each stroke of yellow burned brighter than anger. I remembered every moment, the thanks that never came, the casual assumption that I would always be there. When I reached the bottom of the pile, I saw the total. I'd stopped keeping track after a while, but the math was right there in front of me now. Tens of thousands, enough to buy my own home outright. My throat tightened. I sat back, surrounded by receipts, drowning in proof. For years I'd told myself this was love. But love that only moves one way isn't love, it's labor. I reached for the thick binder I'd bought months ago for work, the kind with clear sleeves and sturdy rings. On the spine, I printed a label, "This is what I did for you." One by one, I slid the papers inside. Mortgage, utilities, medical, Megan. Each sheet made a soft crackle as it settled into place, like the sound of something being sealed shut. When I finished, I sat for a while just staring at it. The binder was heavier than I expected. Maybe that was fitting. It carried the weight of my silence. By noon, I needed air. I grabbed my coat and walked through the drizzle to the small coffee shop near the waterfront. I hadn't been there in months, not since before the ban. Janet Morales was already there waiting, my old boss mentor friend. She was sipping black coffee and reading the paper, her glasses perched low on her nose. She looked up as I approached. "Lauren," she said with a smile that was both sharp and kind, "you look like someone who's finally ready to talk." I sat down, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. I did something I said quietly. I figured she replied, "You have that look." And so I told her. I told her everything: the ban, the plate on the porch, the calls I ignored, the years of quiet payments. I spoke slowly, methodically, the way you read a confession out loud, to see if it sounds as bad as it feels. When I finished, she didn't say anything for a while. She just took a sip of her coffee, studying me. Then she said, "They're not just taking your money, Lauren. They're taking your future. Every dollar you give them is a piece of your time, your energy, your peace. You've been subsidizing their irresponsibility for years." I nodded, my throat tight. "I don't know how to stop." "Yes, you do," she said calmly. "You've already started. But if you want to be free, you have to perform a financial exorcism." The phrase hit me like a jolt. "A what?" She leaned forward. "You have to remove yourself from their system. Every account, every card, every autopay. Leave them to face their own reality. You can't save them and save yourself at the same time." Her words settled in deep. "How do I even start with evidence?" she said, gesturing to the binder in my bag. "You've already done the hardest part, acknowledging it. Now you need to quantify it. You need to make it real." We spent the next hour at that table sketching out a plan. Janet had that sharp, practical mind I'd always admired. She helped me make a checklist: disconnect autopay from the mortgage account, separate my phone line, and transfer the others to Mom, remove my card from all shared subscriptions, close joint grocery and pharmacy accounts, notify the bank of deauthorization for linked family payments. It was simple, really. Brutal, but simple. As she spoke, I wrote it all down, each step precise and final. I could already imagine the fallout, the confusion, the calls, the guilt trips, but for once it didn't scare me. Janet reached across the table and touched my hand. "They'll panic," she said. "They'll accuse you of betrayal, but you're not betraying them. You're ending a cycle they built." I swallowed hard. "And when they start calling," she smiled faintly, "don't answer. Let the silence do what your words never could." We left the cafe an hour later. The clouds had parted slightly, a thin line of pale blue cutting through the gray. Back home, I set the binder on my desk. I flipped through it again, tracing the highlighter marks, feeling a strange mix of grief and pride. This was my history, unwanted, unacknowledged, but mine. I opened my laptop and created a new document, titling it Financial Exorcism, Plan of Action. The list grew longer as I typed. Every account, every card, every password. It felt like untying knots one by one. When I was done, I sat back and whispered to the empty room, "Tomorrow." Because it couldn't just be a thought anymore. It had to be an act. The rain started again, softer this time, almost gentle. I turned on some music, low jazz, something calm, and started organizing the physical files into neat stacks. Mortgage, phone, utilities, subscriptions, medical, Megan. The repetition was soothing, like sorting through ghosts. When the last paper slid into its sleeve, I took a pen and wrote across the final page in bold letters, "This is what I won't do anymore." The words looked powerful, defiant, alive. I slipped the pen back into the drawer, closed the binder, and turned off my phone. The world outside dimmed into quiet gray, but for the first time that quiet felt like something sacred. The decision was made. Tomorrow I would start cutting the cords, one bill, one lie, one name at a time. I barely slept that night. By dawn, the plan was no longer just an idea in a notebook. It was a promise I intended to keep. Monday arrived, gray and cold, the kind of morning where the air itself felt suspended. I woke before the alarm, heart steady, mind clear. The plan was already written out on my desk, beside the thick binder marked, "This is what I did for you." I brewed coffee strong, and Black sat down at my desk and whispered the words I'd written on a yellow note the night before. Cut everything. It was the first time in years I felt like I was about to make a decision entirely for myself. I opened my laptop and logged into the mortgage account. My hands didn't shake, though I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. I'd paid their property taxes for 3 years. Thousands of dollars to keep a roof over a home I wasn't even welcome in. The screen blinked, asking for verification. I typed my password, hit Manage Autopay, and hovered over the button. A small line of text appeared. "Are you sure you want to cancel automatic payments?" "Yes," I whispered. One click, and it was done. The confirmation email came seconds later. Autopay cancellation confirmed. The words felt heavier than they should have, final, in a way I hadn't anticipated. I leaned back in the chair, exhaled slowly, and said aloud, "One down." The next task was harder. The phone plan. 6 years of bills paid by me. 6 years of constant calls, endless texts asking for help, gossip, drama, all carried through a line I owned. I grabbed my bag and binder, locked the apartment, and drove downtown to the wireless provider. The air smelled like wet pavement and cold coffee from the shop next door. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. A young man in a neat polo greeted me with a cheerful smile. "How can I help you today?" I handed him the account details. "I need to separate my number from this plan and transfer the rest of the lines to a new account holder. Her name's Ellen Avery." He glanced at the screen. "So you're giving up ownership of the family plan?" I nodded. "Exactly." He tapped away, reading something on the monitor. "Okay, just confirming you'll be keeping your line, but the remaining 4 will be under Ellen's name. They'll be responsible for the full bill moving forward." "That's correct." He handed me a stylus and turned the tablet toward me. "Sign here." The moment the pen touched glass, a strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't guilt, it was release. 6 years of obligations undone by one signature. When the transaction finished, the young man smiled politely. "You'll get a confirmation email shortly." "Anything else today?" I shook my head. "No, I think that's everything." As I left, the automatic doors opened with a soft hiss. Cold air rushed in, biting at my cheeks. I walked to my car, feeling lighter, freer, like I'd just stepped out of a heavy coat I didn't realize I'd been wearing. Back home, I continued the purge. Amazon. Remove payment method. Netflix. Remove payment method. Hulu. Remove payment method. Pharmacy account. Remove payment method. Every click was a clean cut, another thread snapping loose. The screen flashed payment required again and again, and each time I smiled. When I reached the grocery delivery app, I hesitated. I remembered the countless orders I'd placed for them, bags of fruit, milk, bread, and the occasional bottle of wine Mom pretended was for cooking. I hovered for a moment, then clicked delete card. The confirmation appeared and I whispered, "Exactly." Hours passed without me noticing. By the time I looked up, the sky outside had shifted from pale gray to soft amber. My apartment looked different somehow, cleaner, sharper, as if the energy inside had changed. My phone buzzed once. "Janet." "How's the exorcism going?" her text read. I laughed softly and typed back, "Peaceful." "Scary." "Free." Her reply came seconds later, "Good." Freedom always feels wrong at first. That's how you know it's real. I set the phone down and stared out the window. The rain had stopped and sunlight peeked weakly through the clouds. For a long moment I just breathed. Then, like a ghost returning, a memory surfaced. 8 months earlier, Megan had called sobbing. Her car had broken down on the highway and she was stranded. I'd wired her $600 that same afternoon. Later that night, she posted a photo with the caption, "New wheels, new energy." Hard work pays off. I'd scrolled past it, feeling that dull, familiar ache in my chest. Now, looking at that same transaction on my screen, I took a black pen and drew one final line through it. Next to it, I wrote a single word, "End." I sat there a long time staring at the ink. The page looked clean again. By evening, the checklist on my desk was nearly complete. Mortgage, cancelled. Phone plan, separated. Online accounts, removed. Streaming services, disabled. Groceries, pharmacy insurance, delinked. One unchecked box remained at the bottom: respond to family. I looked at it then at the stack of notifications on my phone. Voicemails, texts, missed calls. Dozens of them. I reached for the pen again and drew a slow, deliberate line through the final box. Done. As I set the pen down, the apartment went completely silent. The kind of silence that used to make me anxious now felt sacred. I brewed one last cup of coffee, curled up in the armchair by the window, and watched the city lights flicker to life. Somewhere in some other house, my family was probably scrambling, calling service providers, trying to log into accounts, wondering what had gone wrong. But nothing had gone wrong. Everything had finally gone right. I thought of the binder sitting on my desk, thick and heavy, glowing faintly in the lamplight. It looked like something between a ledger and a shield. I opened it one last time, flipping through the neatly organized pages, each marked and highlighted like chapters of a story I'd finally finished writing. On the final page, in my own handwriting, was the phrase I'd added that afternoon: "This is what I won't do anymore." I traced the words with my fingertips, closed the cover, and whispered, "This is what freedom looks like." Then, almost without realizing, I laughed, a quiet, breathless laugh that filled the room and startled me. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel vengeful. I just felt ready. Tomorrow, I knew, would bring their confusion, their fury, their guilt. They would call, accuse, beg, but tonight there was only peace. Outside, the streetlights reflected off the wet pavement. The city hummed softly, unaware that something monumental had just shifted in a small apartment window. I took the binder, placed it in the drawer of my desk, and shut it gently. The sound of the latch clicked like punctuation. Then I turned off my phone, climbed into bed, and let the silence hold me. Tomorrow would be chaos, but tonight belonged to me. I woke up the next morning to the sound of my phone vibrating non-stop on the nightstand, proof that the storm I'd been preparing for had finally begun. The first message came at 7:30 in the morning. "Megan Hay, is Netflix down? It's asking for a credit card." I stared at the screen for a moment, then set the phone face down beside my coffee mug. By the time I'd taken the first sip, another message appeared. "Mom says the phone bill is in her name now." "What did you do?" I didn't reply. The silence felt deliberate, like the steady beat of a metronome guiding me through the morning. Then came the flood. Notifications filled the screen, each one a tiny burst of panic. "Mom, Lauren, the power bill didn't go through. I thought you had that on autopay. Dad, honey, the internet's been cut off. Did you switch cards, Megan? You can't just do this. You're ruining everything I read, each one as if they were lines from a script I'd already memorized." I put the phone down, reached for my notebook, and flipped to the checklist. On the first page, under Stage 1 Awareness, I drew a neat checkmark. It had begun. By noon, the texts had escalated. Mom's tone shifted from confusion to accusation. "Lauren, this isn't funny. The pharmacy said the card was declined for Dad's medication. You need to fix this." I didn't fix it. I'd fixed everything for years: mortgages, car repairs, medical bills, even Megan's emergencies. But fixing had always meant breaking myself in smaller, quieter ways. Today, I chose stillness. The calls started next. I let the phone ring until it went to voicemail. Then another call. And another. Finally, I played one back. Mom's voice filled the room, sharp and trembling. "Lauren, this is ridiculous. You can't just leave us like this. Your father is a wreck. He's panicking. You know how bad his blood pressure gets. Call me back." There was a pause, then Megan's voice in the background, muffled but clear enough. "She's doing this on purpose, Mom. She wants us to suffer." A click, then silence. I hit delete. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city looked washed clean, every surface shining. I leaned against the window and thought about how strange it was, how peace could look like destruction to people who'd built their lives on your labor. I didn't feel cruel. I felt awake. Later that afternoon, Dad's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated for the briefest second, then let it go to voicemail too. His message came through minutes later. "Lauren, it's Dad. The pharmacy said our card didn't go through and your mom's losing her mind. I don't know what's going on, but we need to talk. Please, sweetheart, just call us." His voice wasn't angry. It was small, almost defeated. For a moment, guilt rose in me like a tide, familiar, sharp automatic, but I caught it before it drowned me. I whispered to myself, compassion isn't compliance. I set the phone aside and opened the binder. Each page was a reason, each line a memory. The evidence of years spent holding up people who never once thought to hold me. By evening, the group chat came alive again, a digital riot. "Megan, this is financial abuse, Lauren. Do you even realize what you've done, Mom? Your father can't get his prescription. This is serious. I raised you better than this. Megan, we're changing the locks if you don't fix this by tonight." I smiled faintly at that last one. They didn't realize I had already walked away long before they'd noticed the space I left behind. At 7, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Janet. "How's the aftermath?" her voice asked through the speaker. "Loud," I said. "But manageable," she chuckled softly. "That's how withdrawal works. They're crashing from the drug of dependency. Don't mistake noise for power, Lauren. Silence is still your ally." I looked around my apartment calm and untouched by their chaos. "I'm trying," I said. "You're doing more than trying," she replied. "You're detoxing from guilt." Her words hung in the air even after we ended the call. Detoxing from guilt. That's exactly what it felt like. Painful, necessary, and cleansing. I spent the next hour cleaning the apartment. Not because it needed it, but because I did. I scrubbed counters, dusted shelves, folded clothes. With every motion, I felt lighter, as if shaking off years of weight I'd been told to carry. When I finally sat down again, the sun had set, and the city below glowed amber. My phone lit up once more, another voicemail. I didn't listen right away. I just stared at the notification for a while before pressing play. Mom again. Her tone was different this time, tired, almost pleading. "Lauren, please. Your father is exhausted. None of us can sleep. You can't just abandon your family like this. We're not perfect, but we're family. Please call me." There it was, the hook. The word she always used like a net. Family. I almost laughed. Family to her meant obligation. To me it now meant boundaries. I deleted the message without saving it. For dinner I made pasta, poured a glass of wine, and sat by the window. Across the street I could see another family eating together through the glow of their dining room. A father carving turkey, a child passing bread, laughter echoing faintly. The kind of picture-perfect moment my mother loved to chase but never truly had. I twirled the pasta on my fork and thought about the difference between having a family and being consumed by one. For years, I'd bought my seat at their table with money times silence. Tonight, I ate at my own. Later that night, my phone buzzed one last time. A new message from Megan. "You're heartless. You think you're so powerful now, but you'll regret this. Mom's crying. Dad's sick. You're pathetic." I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, another message came. "I didn't mean that. I just need help with next month's rent. Please." The shift was predictable, almost theatrical. From rage to pleading, from insult to manipulation. I could practically hear the tone in her voice, syrupy and false. I turned off my phone. The silence that followed was enormous. I walked to the balcony and stepped outside. The air was cold, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and pine. Somewhere below, a stray cat darted across the street, free and untamed. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to explain myself, to fix, to comfort. They could stew in confusion. They could learn. I whispered to the night, they always said family takes care of each other. I finally agree. Because now they'd have to take care of themselves. Inside the binder, sat open on the table, the lamplight, catching the yellow highlights across each page. The words no longer looked like records of loss. They looked like boundaries drawn in ink. I closed it gently and whispered stage 1 complete. Then I turned off the lights, lay down in bed, and let the quiet fill every corner of the room. For years, my silence had been something they used against me. Tonight it was mine. By Sunday night, the calls had stopped coming, and just when I began to think the storm had finally passed, a new message appeared, short, cold, and impossible to ignore. The message came late Sunday night. "Mom, come home tomorrow. We need to talk. All of us." No emojis this time, no passive-aggressive pleasantries, just that one line. I stared at the screen for a long time, the glow from my lamp casting pale light across the binder on my desk. My fingers brushed over its spine, tracing the words I'd written weeks ago. "This is what I did for you." It felt like the moment before a verdict. I closed the message, powered off my phone, and went to bed without replying. Sleep didn't come easy. When it finally did, it was filled with dreams of slammed doors and empty chairs. The next morning, the sky over Portland was colorless. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and silver. I brewed a single cup of coffee, strong and black, the way I always did before something difficult. Then, I packed the binder into my bag, zipped it closed, and whispered, "Time to finish this." The drive to my parents' house felt longer than it ever had. I'd driven that road hundreds of times, birthday parties, holidays, random Sunday dinners, but today it felt foreign. Each familiar landmark looked older, more distant, like I was passing through the remnants of a life I no longer belonged to. When I pulled up to the house, the porch light was already on, even though it was barely 10 in the morning. The same house I'd once helped pay the taxes for, the same roof I'd helped keep over their heads. The windows glowed warm from inside, but the warmth felt staged, like a photograph of comfort instead of the real thing. I parked on the street and sat in the car for a moment, listening to the rain drip from the branches. My heartbeat was steady, my breathing even. I wasn't scared. I was ready. When I finally stepped inside, the air was thick, heavy with the smell of coffee and tension. Mom sat at the end of the kitchen table, hands folded tight. Dad was beside her, pale and quiet. Megan lounged in a chair opposite them, arms crossed, eyes sharp. No one spoke as I walked in. I pulled out a chair at the far end of the table, set the binder down with a solid thud, and sat. The sound echoed in the silence. Mom was the first to speak. "Lauren," she said softly, "we just want to understand why you're doing this." I met her eyes. "You already know why," Megan scoffed. "Oh, please, you've been punishing us for weeks, turning off accounts, cutting off money, acting like some kind of martyr. You're not the victim here, Lauren." I opened the binder and turned it toward them. "You want to talk about victims? Let's start with reality." The first tab read Mortgage Assistance. Pages of printed receipts lay beneath clear plastic sleeves, each one highlighted and dated. 3 years of property taxes, I said calmly. Paid by me, $1.500 here, $2.200 there. Every time you were short, I covered it. You never noticed, because you never asked how. Dad blinked at the papers, his jaw tightening. I didn't know you were still doing that." I looked at him, not unkindly. "You didn't want to know." I flipped to the next section, utilities. Electricity, water, gas. Every month on autopay from my account. 6 years. That's nearly $14,000. Mom's face flushed. "We would have paid you back eventually." "No," I said quietly. "You wouldn't have." "Because you never did." Megan let out a low laugh, shaking her head. "Oh my God, you're seriously keeping score. Who does that? Your family, not a loan officer." I turned the binder toward her, opening to the thickest tab. "Megan. Apparently I was both." Her smirk faltered. I slid a page toward her. $600 for rent, $400 for a security deposit, $250 for your emergency credit card bill, and let's not forget $900 for your boutique lease. Do you even remember that one? You posted about it. Investing in yourself. I think you called it." She flushed red. "You said you didn't mind." I didn't mind helping my sister, I said evenly. I minded being your silent ATM. God, you're unbelievable, she stood, voice rising. Who does this? Who makes a scrapbook of guilt? I leaned forward. Someone who's tired of being erased. The words landed hard. Even Dad looked up, startled by the edge in my voice. I turned another page, sliding it toward Mom. Here's your car repair, the one you said you'd pay me back for, and the dentist bill, and the hospital copay, and the insurance gap. Mom's lips trembled. Lauren, this is a betrayal. We're your family. I felt something cold and steady settle inside me. A betrayal. You banned me from Thanksgiving. You left food for me on the porch like I was a stray cat. You laughed while I sat alone. That's betrayal, Mom. This, I tapped the binder, this is the truth. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the slow tick of the kitchen clock. Finally, Dad reached for one of the papers. His hand shook as he looked at it. You paid for my surgery, he said softly. I didn't know. You didn't ask, I said gently. You never asked what I was giving up to keep you all afloat. Megan sank back into her chair, eyes darting between us. So what now, you want us to write you a check? Is that what this is about? I shook my head. No, I don't want your money. I want my peace. Mom's voice cracked. You can't just walk away like this. Yes, I said, standing. I can. Megan pushed her chair back sharply. You can't leave us like this. I turned to her, meeting her glare without flinching. I'm not leaving you like children. I'm leaving you like adults. The words hung in the air, sharp and clean. For the first time, no one argued. Even Mom looked stunned. Dad's eyes glistened, but he didn't speak. I gathered the binder, closed it carefully, and slid it back into my bag. I'm done being the bank. I'm done being the quiet one. I'm done paying for my own erasure. Mom whispered something, maybe my name, but I didn't turn back. I walked to the door, the sound of my footsteps echoing through the hall. Outside, the air was cool and damp. I paused at the edge of the porch, looking back at the house one last time. The same door I'd once walked through carrying groceries, bills, comfort. Now I walked away carrying nothing but my own name. When I got in the car, I expected to feel the familiar twist of guilt, the ache of loss. But instead, there was only quiet, not the hollow silence of isolation, but the calm, clean silence of freedom. As I drove away, I rolled the window down, letting the wind cut through the lingering scent of rain. For years, silence had been something they forced on me. Now it was something I chose. I drove home through the rain without looking back, and by the time the house disappeared in my rearview mirror, I knew the real silence, the one that follows truth, was just beginning. The drive back from my parents' house felt longer than the one going there. The rain had returned steady this time, drumming against the windshield like a metronome for my thoughts. I didn't cry. I didn't replay the confrontation. I just drove, the binder seat-belted beside me, the soft glow of the dashboard lighting its spine. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I'd left something behind. I felt like I'd reclaimed something that was mine. When I got home, the quiet greeted me like an old friend. I hung up my coat, set the binder on the counter, and turned off my phone. I didn't want to hear their voices or read their messages. The storm was over, and I was still standing. That night, I slept deeper than I had in months. When I woke the next morning, the world was soft and gray, the air cool and clean. I brewed coffee, opened the window, and listened to the faint sound of rain fading into drizzle. The peace felt fragile but real. For a few hours, everything was still. Then right around noon, my phone started buzzing again. I let it go to voicemail, then another call, then another. By the time I checked, there were 6 new messages. The first was from Megan, her voice clipped and furious. "You're a monster, Lauren. You think you can just humiliate us and walk away. You're heartless. I'm telling everyone what you did. Delete." The next was Mom. Her voice trembled, part anger, part guilt. "Lauren, I don't know what we're going to do. Your father hasn't slept. His chest hurts. How could you be so cruel? This isn't the daughter I raised." I paused before deleting that one. For a second, guilt tugged at me again, then I remembered Janet's words. They'll use guilt to reel you back in. Don't mistake their panic for repentance. I hit delete. Dad's message came last. Lauren, it's Dad. Call me. We need to figure this out. His voice was quiet, tired. It didn't sound like a command. It sounded like surrender. I didn't call back. I sat at the kitchen table drinking cold coffee, the binder open in front of me. The pages looked softer now, the ink slightly smudged in places. Not evidence anymore, just memory. That afternoon I took a long walk through the park. The air smelled like pine and wet earth. I watched children chase each other through puddles, their laughter echoing through the open space. A small part of me ached not for my family, but for the years I'd spent chasing approval the same way, running towards something that was never really mine to catch. By the time I got home, the voicemail counter had climbed again. 10, 12, 15. I scrolled through without listening. Every message was a different version of the same story: anger, guilt, desperation. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I opened a new notebook, fresh pages that smelled like possibility. On the first line, I wrote, "What peace feels like." The words felt foreign and soft under my pen. I made dinner for one: pasta with olive oil, garlic, and herbs. I poured a small glass of wine, sat by the window, and watched the city lights flicker against the rain-soaked streets. For the first time, eating alone didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. The next morning, my phone buzzed again, but this time the message was different. Dad again, but his tone had changed. "Lauren," he said, "I went through some old papers. I found receipts for things I didn't remember you paying for. The roof, the car, your mom's dentist bill. I'm sorry. I didn't see it before. I should have." My breath caught somewhere between surprise and relief. It wasn't a full apology, not yet, but it was the first real acknowledgement of the truth. I listened to that message twice before deleting it. Not out of anger, out of closure. For years I'd carried the weight of being unseen, unheard, and unappreciated. Now I didn't need their recognition to feel whole. I just needed to know I had told the truth to them and to myself. Still that night, the old habit of worry crept in. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if Dad really was okay, if Mom's guilt would eat at her or fade into denial. But then I remembered the sticky note on my fridge, written in bold black ink: "No is a complete sentence." I whispered it aloud like a prayer, and sleep found me easily after that. Days passed quietly. Work, meals, walks. Life shrank down to its simplest form and somehow felt bigger than it ever had. The world didn't end because I said no. My family didn't implode because I stopped paying their bills. They adjusted. They had to. A week later, I met Janet for coffee again. She studied me for a long moment, then smiled. "You look different," she said. "Lighter," I answered. "That's what happens when you stop carrying other people's weight," she said. "Guilt feels heavy until you realize it was never yours to hold." I smiled, stirring my coffee. "They've been calling less," I said. "Fewer messages. I think they're coping." "Good," she said. "Let them." Her calm certainty grounded me. For years I'd equated love with fixing connection with servitude. Now I was learning that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and for others is step back and let the consequences land. That evening, I walked home through the drizzle. The city lights shimmered against the wet pavement, and for the first time the reflections didn't feel like ghosts. They felt like mirrors. When I got home, I checked my phone. Only one new message from Dad. I hesitated, then played it. "Your mother and I talked," he said slowly. "We're seeing a financial advisor this week, trying to get organized. I guess we should have done it sooner. I just wanted you to know." I closed my eyes. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was growth. And that was enough. I texted back a simple reply: "I'm glad you're figuring it out. Nothing more. No apologies. No explanations." Later that night, I sat by the window again, binder on my lap. I opened it one last time, flipping to the first page. The yellow highlights still gleamed under the lamplight, but they didn't sting anymore. They felt distant, like someone else's story I'd been asked to hold for too long. I traced a finger over the title, "This is what I did for you," and then closed it gently. It no longer felt like a record of debt. It felt like proof of release. The silence around me deepened, not the brittle silence of isolation, but the kind that comes after a storm, the kind where you can finally hear your own breathing again. I looked out into the dark, the rain falling softly, and whispered, "I'm done fixing. I'm just living now." And for the first time, the words didn't sound like defiance. They sounded like peace. By the time a new week began, the voicemails had stopped, the house was quiet again, and for the first time in years, I woke up to a life that finally felt like it belonged to me. The morning light slipped gently through the blinds, soft and gold, touching the edges of my new apartment, like a quiet promise. It had been 6 weeks since I last set foot in my parents' house, and in that time the world had rearranged itself into something simpler. Smaller, yes, but mine. I padded across the hardwood floor, barefoot, coffee in hand, and opened the window. Portland air, cool and clean, drifted in, carrying the faint scent of rain and cedar. Down below, people walked, their dogs jogged, started their days. I'd forgotten how peaceful it felt to wake up without dread. No lists to check, no bills, to track, no one waiting to call me selfish for not answering fast enough. I sat on the couch, sipping my coffee, watching sunlight catch the dust motes in the air. This was what peace looked like, not dramatic, not cinematic, just ordinary and steady. The binder sat on a shelf across the room, tucked neatly between 2 books. I hadn't opened it since that day. I didn't need to. It was a monument now, not a wound. A reminder that survival doesn't always mean fighting it, sometimes means walking away. Around mid-morning, my phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Lunch today, my treat." I smiled. For years, I'd been the one paying the one, covering the one, smoothing over awkward silences by reaching for the check. Now it was nice to be on the other side of generosity. "Sure," I texted back. "See you at noon." The cafe was bright and full of chatter when I arrived. Rachel waved from a corner booth, 2 coffees already waiting. "You look different," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. "Different good or different bad?" She studied me for a second, then grinned. "Good. Lighter, like you stopped carrying a backpack full of rocks." I laughed softly. "That's not far off." As we talked, I realized how much space I'd cleared for real conversation now that my life wasn't consumed by managing someone else's chaos. We talked about work, travel books, even silly things like trying new recipes. For once, there was no guilt lurking under the surface, no fear that I'd have to rush home to fix a disaster. At one point, Rachel reached across the table and said, "You know you did something most people never manage. You stopped bleeding for people who wouldn't even notice if you died of paper cuts." Her words landed heavy, then settled somewhere deep in me. I didn't reply, just squeezed her hand in quiet agreement. After lunch, I stopped by a small plant shop on my way home. The air inside smelled like soil and eucalyptus. I bought a fern, a bright green thing with delicate fronds, and placed it by my kitchen window. New life for a new chapter. The apartment still felt a little empty, but it was the good kind of empty, the kind that waited for possibility. Later that week, Janet came by. She hadn't seen the place yet. When she stepped inside, she smiled, looking around approvingly. "So this is freedom," she said, taking in the tidy space, the warm light, the absence of noise. I poured her coffee and handed her a cup. "It's small," I said, "but it's mine." She nodded. "Ownership isn't about size, it's about peace." We sat at the small dining table, steam curling from our mugs. "How are they?" she asked finally. I hesitated. "Quiet. I think they're managing. Dad mentioned they hired a financial advisor." "Progress," she said, her voice neutral but kind. "And you?" "I'm good," I said honestly. "I'm learning how to be still." Janet smiled. "Stillness isn't the absence of movement, it's the presence of yourself." We talked for a while about work, her grandkids, her garden. When she left, she hugged me tighter than usual. "Don't confuse peace with loneliness," she whispered, before walking out the door. That night I sat on the couch with a book and a glass of wine. Outside the city was wrapped in quiet rain. Inside, there was only the soft hum of my refrigerator and the occasional sigh of the wind through the window. I looked around the room at the walls. I'd painted myself the furniture. I'd chosen the tiny fern by the window unfurling new leaves. Every part of it was mine, not bought for someone else, not borrowed, not owed. The next morning, an email popped up from Dad. The subject line read, "Just an update." I hesitated before opening it. It was short. "We're doing better. Working with the advisor helped. Megan moved in with a friend and got a new job. Your mother's been cooking again. I know things are still tender, but I wanted you to know we're trying. No excuses, no manipulation, just an acknowledgement." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back, "I'm glad you're finding your way." It felt enough. Closure didn't always come wrapped in apologies. Sometimes it came as quiet understanding. That weekend, I finally did something I'd put off for months. I started a new folder on my laptop. I named it Plans. Inside, I created subfolders, savings goals, travel, 2025 future projects. Then, just for fun, I added one more things that make me smile. I filled it with photos, the fern by the window, the view from my morning walks, the latte art from the cafe, the sky over Portland, when the rain finally broke. Small things, but they were mine. That evening, I pulled out the binder one last time. I opened it slowly, flipping through the pages that had once felt like scars. Now they were just history. Proof that I'd survived, proof that I'd learned. On the final page, I wrote a single line at the bottom in pen: "Freedom was never given. It was reclaimed." Then I closed it for good and slid it onto the highest shelf where it belonged, not forgotten, but finished. As I stood there, the last light of day stretched across the room, golden and soft. I poured myself another cup of coffee and leaned against the window, watching the sky fade into pink. For years, I'd thought peace was something that came after forgiveness. Now I knew it came from self-respect. I smiled at my reflection in the glass. "You made it," I whispered. Outside, a breeze stirred the fern, and somewhere in the distance, church bells began to ring, quiet and steady. I closed my eyes and breathed in the sound, the air, the moment. Freedom, it turned out, didn't roar. It whispered. By the time December rolled around, the days had grown shorter and quieter, and as Christmas lights began to flicker across the city, I realized the season felt different this year, calm, unburdened, and entirely my own. Snow began falling on Christmas Eve, soft and quiet the way forgiveness sometimes arrives slowly, almost unnoticed. I sat by the window with a cup of cocoa, watching the flakes drift through the golden light outside. The apartment was warm, the faint scent of cinnamon candles filling the air. On the table beside me lay a single, unopened envelope, the handwriting on the front instantly recognizable. It was from Mom and Dad. I'd found it in the mailbox that morning, wrapped in a red ribbon, my name, written in careful, uneven strokes. For hours, I'd ignored it. I didn't know what I was afraid of, that it would be cruel, or worse, that it would be kind. But now, as the snow thickened and the quiet deepened, I reached for it and broke the seal. Inside was a Christmas card. No long letter, no dramatic plea. Just one line in my father's handwriting: "We're trying to be better. Merry Christmas, Lauren. Love, Dad and Mom." I stared at the words for a long time, feeling something settle quietly inside me. It wasn't joy, not exactly. It was something gentler, acceptance, maybe. I placed the card on the shelf beside the fern next to a candle burning low. For years, I'd begged for acknowledgement, apology, understanding. And now, in 4 short sentences, I realized I didn't need any of it to be free. The card wasn't closure, it was confirmation that I'd already found it. I turned on some music, slow jazz, and began preparing dinner. A simple meal: roasted chicken, a glass of wine, fresh bread. The apartment glowed in soft amber light, the tree in the corner twinkling faintly. There was only one plate on the table, and for the first time that didn't feel wrong. As I poured the wine, my phone lit up. Dad's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Hey," he said quietly. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Dad." He cleared his throat. "Your mom made too much food again. We're keeping things small this year. That sounds nice." There was a pause. "We were wondering if maybe you'd want to come by tomorrow. No pressure, just dinner." I looked at the snow swirling outside white against the city lights. "Maybe not this year," I said softly. "But thank you for asking." He exhaled, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "That's fair. We'll keep a seat for you just in case." "Thanks, Dad." When the call ended, I didn't feel sadness, just peace. We weren't the family we once were, and maybe we never would be again, but that was okay. Healing didn't always mean reunion, it meant release. I sat at the table, the candlelight flickering across the walls. The food was warm, the wine rich. Outside, the snow fell thicker, muting the city, until all that was left was silence. Not the hollow kind, not the painful kind, the kind that holds space for something new. I thought of Mom's old phrase, family first. It used to sting because I was never really part of that family the way they defined it. But now, I understood. Family first could mean something else entirely. It could mean starting over, building something honest, even if it only began with me. After dinner, I walked to the shelf and took down the binder one last time. I hadn't touched it since moving here. The weight of it still surprised me. I carried it to the coffee table, opened to the first page, and ran my hand over the lists, the highlighted numbers, the notes in the margins. They didn't hurt anymore. On the last page, I uncapped a pen and wrote a new line beneath everything else. Peace isn't something they can give back. It's something I had to claim. I closed the binder, gently slid it into a box, and labeled it simply History. As I sealed the box, I felt the smallest flicker of gratitude for the lessons, the boundaries, the strength I'd built in the silence they once gave me. My phone buzzed again this time, a text from Janet. "You made it through, kid. Merry Christmas. Don't forget to rest." I smiled. "You too," I typed back. Then I turned off the phone, lit another candle, and let the soft music carry through the room. The night was still young, the air thick with snow and possibility. I opened the balcony door and stepped outside. The cold kissed my face, and the city stretched below me, shimmering under its white blanket. I looked up at the sky, the snowflakes catching in my hair, and whispered, "I'm okay," and for the first time I truly meant it. The lights from the nearby apartments glowed like stars across the block. In some, I could see families laughing, gathering around their tables. In others, people sat alone like me, reading, listening, breathing. Maybe peace wasn't meant to be shared by everyone at once. Maybe it was something each of us had to find in our own quiet corners. I went back inside, the warmth wrapping around me as I closed the door. I placed the card from my parents on the mantel beside the candle and watched the wax pool slowly steady and golden. The snow kept falling. The clock ticked softly. For years I thought my silence made me invisible. Now it made me whole. I sat on the couch, tucked a blanket over my lap, and whispered one last truth to the quiet. I didn't lose them. I found myself. And just like that, the room felt full again, not with people, but with peace. If you've ever had to choose between family and self-respect, tell me in the comments what you learned from it. Maybe your story can help someone else find their own peace. And if this one spoke to you, stay a little longer, listen to the next story, and don't forget to subscribe for more true family stories, where silence turns into strength.